Hello, so I'm here with Sean Boyd from Wild Tibetan Monks. So, how's it going, Sean?
No, it's good. It's good. We're surviving lockdown. As you can probably see, I have my lockdown haircut, which is the one in front of my eyes. But yeah, yeah. How are
Yeah,
you?
I'm doing good. Well, I have the same. Well, I know it's a lot less hair on
Yeah,
me, but I think a lot of people are kind of struggling with that. But anyways,
yeah.
so yeah, I suppose so. Just to kind of get us started, can you start by explaining kind of your history with music and how you met and kind of introduce the other members of the band as well, and kind of discuss
Uh,
how you started out?
yeah. So there's kind of three main members: myself, Liam, and Ringo. And when I was always in kind of in bands since I was like maybe 14, and then just at the end of secondary school, when we all kind of went off to college, I was in a band with maybe like six people, and everyone ended up kind of going their separate ways and not being
Mm.
able to make practice. And I just came in, and so we ended up breaking up. And I remember thinking to myself, what I need is as small a band as possible, as like three people, like as few people, and all with the same schedule. So when we started college, I just started asking everyone kind of unashamedly, like everyone I met, I was like, do you play an instrument and do you want to be in a band? And I just happened to bump into Liam, our drummer, when he was going to some lecture or something. He didn't know where to ask me. And I showed him where it was, and he's like, run late. And I was just like, oh, by the way, do you play an instrument? And he's like, oh, I play drums. And you could tell in hindsight, like, I don't think he really played drums that long. He just kind of said it. And then I was like,
Yeah,
oh, do you want to be in a band? And see him go, all right. And then he knew Ringo as well. He'd met him before. So we just started practicing. And then after that, we've been together for about 10 years now. Lived together for 2 years in Australia when we went over. Um, yeah, and just kept going. Yeah, that's it.
yeah, no, I like how you just kind of, as you said, went unashamedly, and
Yeah.
you were very like upfront. So I suppose what was that experience like then in terms of, I suppose meeting up with people that you didn't really know much before that. I suppose did it take a while for you to kind of get used to each other? I suppose.
Uh, maybe like I was saying that as well recently. Like the two guys, I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of like that as well. Are pretty kind of laid back. Are pretty shit. Like are easy enough to get on with. So
Yeah,
like I mean, like it's always kind of been that way. Like obviously we'd have the odd different opinions, but in general, like we all kind of got on pretty well. Like we all knows or anything. Like you know, I mean, that's from my point of view. But yeah, generally it was all pretty okay. Like it was pretty quick to gel. And like we're saying, it's that kind of experience you have when you start playing together, that the actual product is greater than the sum of the parts. Kind of like
yeah,
something happens when you're in a bedroom. I know I sound a bit wishy-washy now, but something happens when you're in a
yeah.
bedroom and it sounds really cool and you kind of get hooked on it.
Okay. And then in terms of the product itself, to use that term, can you kind of describe your music and just tell us kind of what it's all about, really?
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to explain. Like for every kind of promotional thing we do, you have to have some spin on it. Yeah, like you have to have something to explain your music. Like, are we an alternative rock band, an indie rock band? And then some of our songs that are yet to come out, like kind of have a lot of slap bass in it and stuff, and some called like indie funk rock. Um, but you always have to say, kind of give it some kind of genre. And
Yeah,
people listening, they probably just think it's your regular kind of rock band. But I think a big part for me, especially writing the songs, is that it's not so much about, like, we're not going out setting out to write some rock song or whatever. We're kind of setting out to write something that we think sounds good, and it's not so much to do with like, oh, I want to write a song about this or that or this kind of topic. It's kind of the feeling, like you get an idea of a melody in your head and you're like, well, if someone in the world that's never heard English before listens to this song, like they should be able to kind of enjoy
yeah.
it as much, and the whole flow of the words and everything, even if they don't know what they mean written down on paper, they can interpret it their own way and it can still
Okay.
hopefully sound good. But
So, essentially, would it be fair to say that you kind of start with a particular idea, like a particular, I suppose, situation or emotion or something like that? and try and make something that fits that feeling?
Uh, I always think it's funny. It tends to be kind of a melody you start with. Like it's
Okay.
very like in writing a song. Well, the way we end up finding it was, I remember in secondary school, I always had that idea of you kind of just strum four chords together and then try and fit something over it. And
Yeah.
then gradually I started realizing, well, kind of a better way to do it is actually think of what you want it to sound like in your head before you even go near an instrument. And then you start playing things, and then you end up kind of working out how to play what you want in your head. And you find these. Another difficult part is all our songs, because we've been together for like 10 years. Like our latest song, Lying Next to You, it's probably first played it like 8 years ago, and it's gradually like small little tweaks and changes.
Okay.
So you kind of bring in a lot of different kind of emotions and different ideas that were going on at the time throughout those 8 years to it. So it's kind of, and someone else like sitting back actually listening to the song probably like, it just sounds kind of like any other song. But to us, in terms of feeling, uh, it's kind of like it's always changing, if that
Yeah,
makes
no,
any.
and yeah, no, that's interesting because so in terms of the music itself, like does it take a long time for you to write? And I suppose what I mean by that is, would you be kind of perfectionist about it and kind of take your time, or do things kind of flow naturally, let's say?
It's a bit of both. So I tend to write, apart from kind of one of our songs, I tend to write all of our songs. So
Okay.
I'll think of an idea, write it, but it could be a few years of writing it. Like we don't have that. Like we only have like 50 years. Like we're not we wouldn't be made to produce an album every 2 years. But then you kind of bring it to the band with the idea, the structure already made, and then you kind of discuss it. Liam will add drums, Ringo will add some extra guitar bits on top. There'll all be all
Yeah.
these little fills. So between the three of us, then it becomes something kind of different. And if I brought those songs to two other people, it could be totally different. And then you kind of discuss where like we could try different ideas, but it's not like, I remember hearing, the band The Coronas. I
Yeah.
remember hearing one of their interviews. We're going to write an album. They go down to Dingle for a week. They rent out a house, and they just bash out an album. Like, well, we've never tried that, but that's not the kind of way we end up doing it at all. Like,
Hmm.
it's just I've had this idea and gradually worked on it, and then it all takes like loads of time.
And is there any particular artists? I know you said that your music was kind of hard to describe, but is there any particular artists that come to mind as someone that's like an inspiration to you or the other members?
Inspiration definitely at the start, and it was definitely Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the big
Okay.
the big part of them was because really, apart from vocals, they have three instruments, and they
Mm.
end up doing so much with them, especially bass. The way you always have that option every song. You could just strum the chords and add in like thirds and fifths all you want, but then you see how Flea like makes like gets so much out of one instrument. That always kind of appealed to me, and kind of appealed. Like if you listen to Lying Next to You, the whole chorus, that kind of riff underneath used to always be played solely on bass. And it's the idea of trying to get as much out of that bass, out of those four strings as you can. So that would have been my major influence, but it's probably been kind of changed over the years, lots of other bands and stuff. And it's whatever we can make that we think sounds good, really.
And yeah, I suppose, do you think that your style has changed much over the years?
Definitely. Like at the start, our big thing was trying to make as much noise as possible, and a huge part of that was like every chorus, like guitar and bass slapping on the drive pedal as hard as we can. And then we started kind of stepping back a bit and thinking, well, like we looked at bands like the XX and Daughter and stuff, and we're like, oh, you could actually make a song that people still really like, that's just not really really heavy,
Yeah.
and you could kind of come down on it and say, like our last song, Cartoons, you hear, but the verse is like just me and a guitar, and it's really really quiet, and then it's sort of like a really heavy chorus. And then if you look at Lying Next to You, our latest track, like the chorus is like, it's like, I like to call it like an inverse chorus. Like it's different, it's not as loud as
Mm.
the verse, kind of brings you back. and it's probably not everyone's cup of tea, to be honest. Like, I totally understand, but you know, it's that idea that it's almost quieter, louder isn't always better.
Yeah.
You know, that's a very simplistic view of how our music has probably changed over the 10 years, but yeah, overall it's definitely changed over the 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. And you spent a bit of time in Australia as well. So can you kind of describe that experience?
Oh yeah, no, that was pretty cool. We went over. Just I know, like, all the promos always make it sound as if we're full-time musicians, and we went over to Australia and we toured around, and like we went over to work just like everyone else, and we were able to do gigs as well.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that was our full-time job. But our Australia was pretty cool. One thing we noticed was, because we were in Perth in Western Australia, was we felt kind of it was almost easier to gig in a way compared to Ireland, but that was potentially because we went over and we're in like a WhatsApp group with like 200 other Irish people. So every gig we played, 30 Irish people came every time. And if you're playing a small bar, that just packs it out. So maybe that changed our whole view, that every time, like, we'd play some kind of small open mic night. And there was one in this place called Mojo's in Fremantle that we were playing, and it was all acoustic acts before us, and it was like
Yeah.
dead, 5 people in the audience, and you're setting up your equipment thinking this isn't going to go well. Like, this is way too loud for this kind of scene. And just before we play our first song, 30 Irish people that we knew packed the place out, and like we start playing. It's like, it's such a good gig. There's people singing along to our songs, and I'm like, man, how do they know the words? Like, our drummer doesn't even know the words to the songs. Like, what the hell? Like, how do they know it? Like, so I think that really probably changed our view, that having like people come to every gig, regardless of when it was on, could be on a Tuesday night, they'd be there. Like, maybe that's a unique side that we saw, but that definitely made it like really good to play.
Okay. And so you're back in Ireland now, and I think the pandemic kind of played a part in that. Is that true?
Uh, no, well, see, that's the thing. Ireland around this time anyway, so kind of like, it all sounds a bit mad, but our big fear was we were coming back in July anyway. We're only ever going to spend 2 years in Australia,
Okay.
and then the pandemic happened, and there was this big kind of panic of, because like I think 4 out of the 5 major airlines that fly from Australia to Ireland like just stopped,
Okay.
and we were terrified that we wouldn't get back home. To be fair, we actually ended up getting on this flight directly from Perth to London that the Irish Embassy like organised, and like, fair play to them. That's like, and we say the Irish Embassy, like, that's like a 4-man operation. Like, that's 4 people for Australia, New Zealand, and all the Pacific Islands, and it took 2 of them to have to organise that flight. Like, that was major. But
Yeah.
like, absolute credit to them, like, getting us home. Um, but yeah, so we were coming home. Like, we would have been here even if the pandemic hadn't happened. The only sad thing was we'd all planned to do pandemic struck, so that was all kind of cut out. But yeah, we definitely were coming back. But it has been hard that the pandemic has, like, we haven't been able to put on a gig since we came back. So that's been a year, and it's on one hand we've been able to promote our music, we've been able to release a lot of stuff. We got to record some songs when the kind of lockdown eased up a bit, but right now we're at this point where we really need the lockdown to kind of end so we can record more, and eventually get to the point where we can start gigging more as well.
Okay. So, obviously it's all very difficult at the moment, with restrictions and lockdowns and all that. But, you mentioned kind of it's important to get back out there and start gigging and stuff again.
Yeah.
Is kind of the long-term goal to just kind of get to do that again? Is that really, I suppose, the furthest out that you have planned at this point in time?
Oh, absolutely. There's I don't know, we did an interview probably like almost a year ago with Demara's Entertainment, and
Okay.
had this idea. It kind of came across that we're Wild Tibetan Monks, but there's this other band that our guitarist kind of found when we were just like a year into it, called Hardcore Priests of Yemen. And he was like, did you guys like Sean? Did you? Because I came up with the names. Like, did you copy it from them? And I was like, no, no, no. They must have copied it from us. But apparently they've been a band longer than we have. But we had this idea: how cool would it be, like this summer, to do like a joint gig, like the Yemen, and like just do some gig in like some bar, um, just like the first gig as like lockdown ends, it'd be massive. And
Yeah.
but I tried to get into contact with them because they've like a Facebook page and all this, but I think they were a band back in like 2011, 2012. So like I've messaged them but haven't heard any reply.
Okay.
But like I don't even know if they're still a band. But if they are, and if they're listening to this, let me know. Get on to me on all social.
So yeah, like hopefully that'll work out in the near
Definitely.
future.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're actually almost out of time. So I suppose just before we finish up, do you have any kind of closing thoughts? And as well as that, can you kind of share if people are looking online on social media and like where can they find you?
Yeah, well, we're on. We only used to be on Facebook, but now we're on Instagram and Twitter as well, and we're on SoundCloud. We're on Twitter, or on YouTube. And we just brought out our lyric video. So we brought out "Lying Next to You," which is our most recent song on Spotify. And we brought out the lyric video for that. So if you actually wanted to learn the words, that's there too. And we've our next track, Navy, coming out maybe two months time. And hopefully we'll be back to gigging by then. But yeah, check us out on those platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, so looking forward to that then. So this is Sean from Wild Tibetan Monks. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks
for
very
having
much.
us.